Fans of the Horus Heresy, thank you very much for joining me for the latest Warhammer 40,000 8th edition Newsflash, and today's date is the 22nd of May 2017. So we're going to go for a 3-in-1 hit on community posts today because GW has been pumping these things out like a pumping thing over the weekend. We've got 3 to go over. So so I'm going to look at transports, Stronghold Assault, which is advanced rules, and then the faction focus very briefly on Tyranids. So that is what we're going to look at today. Links to all the community articles as usual will be in the description. Right, quick graphics review. No change at all. Everything is as it was. My excuse for this, or should I say reason, is I spent all my artistic creativity making my little vehicle templates for the Facings video yesterday. So yeah, but rest assured, those of you who like weird and wonderful developments, I have something special in store for you later this week. So keep an eye out for that. I'm sure you will enjoy it. Let's begin then. So transports. 40k is a game of armoured combat, and infantry transporters are a very important part of armoured combat. Indeed, it is the infantry transports in armoured combat that make armoured combat a viable tactic. There's no point having tanks if you haven't got the infantry to follow up and seize the ground. So we've got a post that tells us about what 8th edition is going to look like, and there's some very interesting developments within this. And I put transports assault time, and the reason I put assault time is for this first rule that we're told about. There will be no longer any restriction on units charging out of vehicles on the turn they disembark. So that is a big change. There is an entire category of vehicles in the game that have become effective and been developed purely because they're assault vehicles, and that rule is going now. So in effect, every vehicle which is a transport is going to have a universal assault vehicle rule, or in effect there's no limitation. So that is a huge change. So what's that going to mean? I mean, this is very interesting to consider what this means. I mean, whenever you talk about assault vehicles, you can't help but think about the weapons of the Marine Legions, because they are arguably the best known and certainly the most developed of the assault vehicles, and in particular the Land Raiders, and for the 30k players and the Relics fans in the 40k, we have the Spartan as well. So the relative value of those vehicles is going to be diminished because they no longer have this unique assault vehicle rule. Well, in the case of a Land Raider, the Phobos variants as opposed to the Proteus variants, which weren't assault vehicles in 7th. Even our humble rhinos, our metal boxers, are going to be able to perform an assault vehicle role in effect now. I don't know, this is interesting this. Those Land Raiders and Spartans are still going to retain an advantage because they have a front mounted door, which, assuming the rule, and this is an assumption because I've not confirmed it, but assuming that you move from the door, they're still going to be they've still got the best placed door to close with the enemy the quickest, assuming you've orientated your vehicle in an orientation facing your enemies. So that's a big deal. That perhaps 8th edition is going to be the edition of the rhinos from the Imperial player viewpoint, because, you know, given the changes in vehicle damage, I think sending hordes of rhinos in with your assault infantry is now a very viable tactic. Well, it certainly seems that way. Yeah, big change there. I imagine for other factions, I guess for a variety of other factions, that's going to be a big deal. In the 30k environment, just thinking to 30k, the Coronis Grav Carrier in an 8th edition iteration has become a much more potent vehicle because it can now serve as an assault vehicle. So yeah, wow, that's a big thing, particularly when you've got a vehicle that can deep strike as well. Let's move on to the next rule. Now, the tempering of this is served by this next point, which units have to disembark before a transport moves. That's what I put by T moves. I ran out of space. So you can't move then disembark. You have to disembark then move. Now, I don't know when they say before the transport moves, I'm presuming that means turning in as well. So your placing in the prior turn becomes very important. And also, interestingly, with this, your opponent in theory has an opportunity to maneuver out of the way of your optimum charge direction, because we're going to be limited by your doors. You could move a unit in your turn further away to get away from the tank, knowing that the infantry have to get out next turn or whatever's in it, and then come at you, and you might be able to squeeze an extra inch or two distance by doing that. So that kind of balances this in a way. Interesting, very interesting. A genuine shift in transport meta. It really is. And talking about meta shifting, the next rule continues with that. Multiple units can now share a transport, and I've put yay. This was one of the really silly rules in 7th, and you know, it was up there for me with silly rules like the D-weapon damage system. The fact that you could only have a single coherent unit plus attached special characters in a transport. It really reduced the value of certain transports for a whole variety of units, particularly the big movers like the Spartans, the Triaroses, anything outside of a super heavy class. And it was also a bit ridiculous because when you got to the super heavy class, the rule didn't apply. Given that the biggest of the standard vehicles, so the Spartan had a transport capacity of 25, given that, it was almost the same as some of the super heavy options in terms of its capacity. You know, it was only 5 less than Thunderhawk. So very arbitrary rules, and yeah, good to see the back of that. I really think it is. And I think a whole host of factions are going to benefit from that, whether or not you have small or large squads. And brilliant for the Heresy, absolutely awesome for the Heresy, because you can now put 2, and I'm just thinking of examples, you could put 2 5-man heavy support squads in a Rhino. So you could have las cannons and missile launchers, you could do 2 tactical support squads, you could do 2 elites. Infantry choices, like maybe if you're playing World Eaters, you could put some Rampages in, and you know, I don't know, maybe some normal tactical marines, or you know, tactical support marines with flamers. It really opens up the options there, it really does. And then the other rule that was mentioned in the article was around occupants and what happens to them if a wreck occurs. Now this was a little bit of an incomplete statement, I thought, and it basically said, well, I've put, what did I say? Occupants are killed on 1 if the vehicle is wrecked. Now, is that their exact words? Just let me double check that. Okay, it's slightly different. It said models inside a wrecked transport will now die on a roll of a 1. This needs clarification to properly understand the implication. It says killed, and when they say, well, when they say die in the article, do they mean sustain a wound, or do they mean instant killed? And that's going to be really significant for multi-wound, and in particular, hero and character models. We'll have to see what that means in the full set of rules, or if we get a more specific Warhammer Community post before release. So there we have some very fundamental changes on how transports work. What do we see? Well, we see the general trend again of removing special rules. We see an increase in the overall capability of transports acting as mobile assault carriers, and certainly your overall capability across an army is going to be much greater than it used to be, and more flexibility as well, sharing transports. A little bit of tempering, but I guess the other thing there is overall that's another enhancement to the overall lethality of your force. That's an observation I've come back to several times while I've been reviewing these sneak peeks on 8th edition. A whole host of rules are increasing the capability of your forces to do their specialised thing, and this is another one. Okay, so let's move on to the second post, talking about Stronghold Assault. So I put Siege Redux, smiley face. I read this and it really did remind me of the old Warhammer Siege, which was a Warhammer Fantasy Battle and Warhammer 40,000 expansion that came out early in the age of 1st edition. And it was a really great expansion, and I and my mates had a lot of fun gaming siege battles. It was full of all sorts of great, cool, groovy stuff. Reading the article talking about the Stronghold Assault sounds like that. So what is Stronghold Assault? So this is a set of advanced rules for the core game, and if we cast our minds back to the earliest information we had about 8th edition, one statement was that there will be a core basic rule set, and then there'll be additional advanced rules that go on top of that to expand the scope of the game for more complex play. And this is a first specific example of such rules for Stronghold Assault. And it talks about, I mean, I've not put many points there. I mean, it talks about how to game battles where there is a significant numerical disadvantage on the side of a defender. There are going to be stratagems for defenders and assaulters, for defenders and assault forces to give them benefits and I don't know, they give two examples in the article. The first is an attacker stratagem, which is sappers, and it gives you a bonus to your wound rolls for when you're attacking a bunker or a fortress in a fight phase. And then we get an example of a defender stratagem, which is escape hatch, and this improves the chances of surviving in the event that a bunker or fortress is destroyed and you still have garrisoning models inside that. So yeah, a couple of neat little things there, and they are going to cost command points in the same way as other stratagems. And there's talk about rules for demolitions, strong point defences, and how to capture or destroy buildings. That's going to be very interesting to see what the take is on buildings in 8th edition. I think there are some parts of the building rules that need attention from 7th. I mean, one of my bugbears with 7th rules was the way blast templates worked in buildings. I was never 100% happy with that. That's already in effect being dealt with because they've removed blast templates. It'll be interesting to see what else they do around managing combat around buildings and fortifications. We also get a bit of a tease as to what the characteristics of structures will be like, and it talks about in the article to say that dedicated battlefield structures will be toughness 10, so that's the toughest thing we've heard about so far. Have over a dozen wounds and a 3+ save. Yeah, they're going to be tough cookies, certainly from a toughness point of view. Interesting note, we have an example of a unit, a non-character unit there that's a 3+ save. We still haven't seen a vehicle or a building with a 2+ armor save. So it'll be interesting to see if we get those, i.e. Land Raider. That looks a lot of fun, particularly for narrative play. Sieges make great fun games. I know I've got a large habitation complex I bought from Warmill a couple of years back, and that's a great thing to play defensive games around. I need to do a review of that at some point. It makes me also wonder what else is going to come under this catch-all term of advanced rules as well. So let's move on to the final post of this threesome, and that is faction focus, the Tyranids. So this is fascinating because the Tyranids are one of those corner case races compared to, let's say, most of the races in 40k follow a bit more of a conventional shooty technological army style. So the Eldar are kind of like that, everything Imperial is, the Tower, but the Tyranids are definitely more left of centre. There is a bit of a flavour there for what they're like, and we get the stats for the Swarm Lord, which looks like a tough cookie. Well, not too tough at toughness 6, but a dozen wounds, 3+ save, 5+ invulnerable save. Invulnerable save becomes 4+ in melee. This guy gets a basic move stat of 9, so 9 inches, so this is very fast. Strength 8, attacks of 7, and his weapon skill is 2+, and his ballistic skill is 3+ to hit. So yeah, very accurate with attacks. A host of rules mean he gets this kind of degraded capability as he loses his wounds, he gets slower, and his strength and attacks drop as he gets weakened by his injuries. There's a few other special rules around him, and then there's a bit of discussion around Hormigants. And well, the specific bit around Hormigants is that a basic move value is 8 inches. So the first concrete example of a fast moving infantry type unit. The human base is 6, Hormigants are 8, the Hive Lord is 9, and a Terminator Marine is 5. So we're starting to get a feel for where all these things sit in the new meta. So I mentioned that the Swarm Lord, or Mr. Swarm Lord, as the article refers to him, has an ability whereby he can accelerate either his movement or a unit's movement by moving again in the shooting phase. So you could get your Hormigants going 16, or him 18, that's fast. And then there's a little bit as well, I think I'd just like to mention, is a little bit of information around Gene Stealers. And if you have units of 10 or more, there is an ability called Flurry of Claws. Flurry of Claws I find quite funny. It sounds a little bit, I don't know, Flurry and Gene Stealers, it sounds a little bit cuddly, but it's funny because of it sounding cuddly. And that gives them 4 attacks each, so they're going to rip things apart. They can get a Broodlord to give them a +1 to hit in melee. I'm guessing that's going to be hitting on a 2+, yes it is. And the Gene Stealers are also stated here to have Rending Claws, which will be a unit specific ability, and any wound roll of 6 gets an AP value of -4. That will rip standard Space Marine armour to shreds. Certainly go and have a look over the Tyranid post because there's quite a lot more there in terms of details. I've just picked out a few of the salient points. So quite a lot there. What do I think about this? So what do I think about these rules? Transports, I like, I think in principle, definitely going to shift the meta, and you can see that certain forces are really it's going to really open up the capabilities for assault for certain unit forces. So I use this a lot as an example, but my mate's World Eater Heresy army is going to benefit hugely from this, because one thing that always constrained his capability was the number of assault transports he could get, and that really hampered him in terms of how many troops he could deliver into melee. And we had a lot of discussion around how this was almost like a critical flaw of the entire World Eater army. This now addresses that, and all he would need to do now is take a couple of spearhead units, so maybe a Spartan or a Land Raider, or a couple of Land Raiders, and then follow it in with a load of Rhinos. And yeah, I can just see it enabling him to be able to get all of his World Eaters into melee a lot more effectively than they can at the moment. So I think that's good. That's good. And I guess, could it become a little bit dominant, this? I'm not sure. I guess this is quite an important balance to that. The fact that you have to disembark before the transport moves. That gives the player at risk of being charged, or the opposing player, an opportunity to do some preemptive reaction to what you want to do. So the attacker doesn't have it all their own way either. So that's interesting, very interesting. And I mean, yeah, as I said, this is a great thing to be able to share transports again. I think transports sound positive. Stronghold Assault, the Stronghold Assault rules, well, that sounds good to me. Lots of interesting ideas there. I like the idea that within the core rules we will get rules on how to conduct this, as opposed to it being an additional supplement, because it's all part of the same game. Yeah, and it's nice to see that the Tyranids are going to benefit from the new move value characteristic, and more perhaps than any other force in the game, the Tyranids have been suffering from the removal of that ability to have faster moving basic troops, because that was always part of what they were. Even back to first edition Tyranid bioconstructs, they were always fast, and when the movement values got standardized, that did scale them back a bit, or certainly not always scale them back a bit, but it changed the meta of how they played. And it just, I don't know, it didn't seem right for them to lose that lightning fast movement and the idea of this onrushing swarm. Those are my observations on these latest news flashes. Please share your thoughts and observations in the comment section. I'll be interested to hear, as always. That's all for today. Thank you very much for listening. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.